give you guys a basic understanding of PBIS, what it means, and the reason we use PBIS is, oh, that was completely like way up. Way up. So at any rate, PBIS is the same methodology that schools use. They went from a zero tolerance policy to PBIS, and if y'all don't know what PBIS means, it just means Positive Behavior Intervention System. So I want to give you guys, that's the first objective for today, give you guys a framework and understanding of that framework. The second one is really go through some techniques, because how many of you ever been in a classroom with a bunch of kids that are just out of control, right? Just, you know, that's, no, never here, right? Never happens here, you know, but, yeah. But the reality of it is, if you've worked with kids long enough, regardless of how well done you do things, and regardless of even the kind of kids, there are just days you're going to walk into a classroom and it's just going to be weird and messy and all that. Full moon again. If you work with kids long enough, you will realize how real the full moon theory is, because you're just like literally, when you can't point it to anything else, look at the lunar phase and you'll be like, holy crap, it's full moon today. So give you guys some real set of techniques and strategies. And what I want us to understand is primarily what you will be learning are strategies, not techniques. And I make a very, very clear difference, because it's really hard to define technique, because that would mean that we would have to play every possible scenario that happens in a classroom and predict those, and then have an if-then statement, a technique. And the problem with that is, one, it's nearly impossible to do that. Two, it would be nearly impossible to do that with the amount of time that we have with each other. And three, that would be like saying we can predict the mixture of behaviors in a classroom at any given setting. So instead of giving you guys techniques, we're going to give you tips and strategies, things that you can remember that can help you. And then the third objective for today is do some role play. You know, we're going to role play a little bit of, you know, scenarios. We're not going to act out the classroom, because, you know, that would be terrible. Just based on the first 5 minutes of this class, I can already tell what kind of classroom management it would require, and we would definitely not want to do that to you guys. Oh, is somebody going to do it? Is somebody going to do it? There's that ball right there. Here, somebody do it. Oh! You almost killed that yourself. So at any rate, those are 3 objectives. I'm going to be real. If we do this right, given the questions and discussions, this training should not be as heavy as the other trainings we've done. And there's a huge possibility, much like the people who were here Friday, that because we've discussed a lot of these things in passing, this is just more defined, that we will end up dismissing early, which I'm sure nobody would want. I don't know that we have time for RT. Oh, thank you. And plus, this isn't necessarily the right crowd. So, this is something that if at this point you are still not familiar with, and we have not hammered enough, then you're either not listening, or I've done a totally terrible job of inserting this in almost every training. But again, this is the youth quality pyramid. This is by which, again, good practices of youth quality falls under. And like I said, for the most part, Higher Ground takes pride in the fact that we're in the middle of these two constantly. Now, ideally, when worst case scenario, sometimes you can only take your room up to the supportive environment. But the reality of it is, there is no reason at any given point in time that you should not. Is somebody going to try it? No.
You have the
ball. Where is it? Still not as good as Alexis though. Alexis hit right in the head and glasses fell off. Still not that good. It was a long range shot. I know. Alright. So
But my mom was in a really bad car accident. She's fine. The car is trashed.
what happened?
But she's fine.
What happened?
Huh?
What happened?
Someone's wrecked her.
Is she in the hospital? Hospital?
I knew she would.
I knew she would when you do that. You are despicable. Marianne, welcome to my life. She does this to me on a daily basis. Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea how angry I am right now because she does that to me. And you guys are lucky she didn't keep it going. If it was with me, she would keep that going for a good 30, 45 minutes. And then I'd be like, and she'd be like, just joking. And I'm like,
That's because I know you instigated the ball throwing.
I didn't actually. So anyway,
You're yelling for it.
oh, trust me, this is re-traumatization for me. So anyway, back to this.
I would have protected you on Sally.
Yeah, whatever. Back to this. At any given day and at any given point, your class should at least be able to climb supportive environment. At any given point. Like I said, interaction, engagement, fine, that's excusable, but there is no reason you should not be able to successfully take your class to at least a supportive environment. What that means is your class is at least managed. They may not be learning anything because it's nearly impossible, because it's completely kind of like really insane. There's a lot of things. It could be because, you know, for example, a fire drill just happened and everybody's high stress. There are moments where it won't go to cooperative learning, but at least you can make sure there is some skill building, it's welcoming and conflict resolution. A lot of that will depend on how well you use classroom management strategies. To be able to climb these two, a lot of it will depend on what we're learning today. This is a typical classroom, and hopefully not your typical experience, but at some point in teaching, this will happen, where you will literally say, this is the worst class I've had. And here's the funny thing about that statement. Once you've said it once, you will realize at another setting that you are absolutely proven wrong, and it can actually get much, much worse than the worst class you've had. It just progressively gets worse. Again, that's not saying anything about you or anything about kids. It's just the reality. The reality of it is kids are kids. And even adults are adults. Look how out of control we got in a matter of 5 minutes. And we're a bunch of adults and we're just joking around. But the reality of it is the reason it happens with kids is for the same reason it happens with adults. We want to have fun. We lack self-control. And that's just art. Yeah. But again, the reality of it is, don't forget that. Sometimes kids, they're not being disrespectful. They're not being butts. They have nothing against you. They're just having fun. And sometimes that fun gets out of control because sometimes there is a catalyst. There's that one kid who might be a sociopath and a psychopath who's literally like manipulating the entire class. Or sometimes it's just the circumstances. You know, it's just one of those. So recognize that. No matter how much experience you've had teaching, you will have days when you're literally going to feel that. There's a bunch of kids making a pyramid and you have no idea what the heck is going on. And it's the worst class you've
I think they're supposed to be sticking their nose in the corner as their punishment, and all the kids are in trouble, so they're all sticking their nose.
It could be that. Yeah, I'm not even really sure. At this point, I'm not really sure what's really happening at this point. Alright, but again, that's how this works.
Because they can be working together, really.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So just find those areas. Like, let me find the learning lessons here. You know, they work together to form a pyramid. That is so cool. Good job, kids. Right. So, here it is, right? In classroom management, PBIS, we want to review the critical features and essential practices of behavior management in classroom setting. Right? I kind of already stated that. So, here is the challenges behind classroom management. And here are the challenges that you will find in schools. And here are often the challenges even at higher ground. The reason why most classrooms get out of control is not really because of the kids. I want to really frame that to you guys, and I want to repeat that. The reason classrooms are usually out of control is not really because of the kids. It doesn't matter if that class is full of high behavior needs kids. Okay? Again, I'm going to be really clear about how we frame things, because sometimes as adults, we get into this mindset that it's the kids. That, you know, I just had the bunch of the worst kids. That's not really true. All right? No matter what, and again, as proof of that, you can literally put the exact same kids with different teachers and have completely different results on the behaviors that they will exhibit in the class. And it could even be the same subject. And again, we can see this sometimes in a difference, like, you know, sometimes I have, and again, I practice what I preach. So a lot of times I have all the BH kids, as we would consider, in my class. Same class, and they would behave completely differently with me in a jiu-jitsu class versus even another coach who would all of a sudden have so many escalations. And again, it's not that the group of kids were different, it's that management skills were different. And so usually the challenges are behind the fact that most staff, most teachers, it's informal and it's not taught. Some of you even experience that coming into higher ground. If you didn't come in during the time frame that we do training, you got jumped into a classroom and thrown to the wolves. And whatever classroom management skills you had, it was informal. It was you finagling with your siblings, if you had siblings, or watching, you know, you having babysat or some previous experience with a youth group. But usually classroom management is informal and it's not taught. Even for teachers who go through 4 years of education, classroom management is still not something that is formally taught in the universities. So recognize that. The second part is, again, this has to do with the adults. It's reactive and ineffective. Most people come to a classroom management without a plan. So the only thing they do is they react. Once the behaviors happen, that's when all of a sudden classroom management is happening. Classroom management should happen from the moment kids walk into the classroom. You should already think classroom management. The other part is disconnected from the mission. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there are no actual rules at higher ground. I don't know if you guys noticed that when you look at the judo room, there are no rules. There are no 10 rules, you know, and it's funny, but our board president, Senator Bradley, he actually literally says he can predict the environment on the classroom based on the rules posted on the board. And he says that usually rooms that have the rules are the worst kind of classrooms that he finds. And rooms that have expectations and values are the best classrooms that he finds. Or rooms that have nothing are the best classrooms he finds. Because again, once you have rules, it goes back to reactive and ineffective. Usually, rules are reaction. Why do we have rules? Let's be real, as adults. Why do we have rules?
We don't want to deal with things.
We don't want to deal with certain things. So we tell kids, you know, be quiet. Why? They're kids. They're not going to be quiet. You know, so there should be values. You know, we could have rules right now, like no throwing ball, right? Could make that rule. Why? Because I don't want to deal with having to bring you back to focus after everybody's had fun trying to hit Alexis's head, right? But the reality of it is, the reality of it is, it is my problem as an adult, and I'm making rules based on what I don't want to deal with. Think about the many times, even as parents, either you as a parent or your parents gave you rules that make no sense, but they're simply because your parents have a headache. Like, just nobody talk loud. Why? Like, in the context that we're in, if we're in a playground or in the yard, why is that even a rule? Well, because your mom or dad just doesn't want to deal with that. They don't like it. So usually rules are often disconnected from the mission. Whereas if you are giving kids values like be respectful, kids understand the context from the activity perspective, why that's related. Same thing as informal and untaught, usually staff lack fluency, there's lack of durability, and this last part is something that shocks people, but I hope doesn't shock you anymore. But your curriculum and content and your session flow is the best behavior management tool you have. So usually, this is why the issue with substitute teachers, right? Usually, if you don't have the instructional fluency, you don't know what you're gonna teach, you're not sure what you're gonna teach, you're not sure of how it should flow, that will often result to majority of the classroom behavior problems that you run into in a classroom. I want you to think back of all the times you almost half killed or your class plotted to kill a sub. Right? I mean, maybe not kill them, but there was a subconscious desire among everyone, right, to ditch the class, do something, sabotage the class. Why? Why did you guys, again, let's just be honest, think back to your days. Why did you guys do that? Why did we do that? What were your mindset? We knew we could get away with it. We knew the sub didn't know. What else?
To see how strong the sub was, so we used to change our names, switch names.
It's a psychotic as that may sound. Kids do that. They're testing the waters. In your own time, remember it. Remember how many times maybe you haven't participated in it. If you're, like, honestly, if you're my sister-in-law, Cheryl, she probably never participated in it because that's just the type of person she is. But remember the amount of times you watch your friends as a kid, maybe even participated in literally nothing more than just testing the adult's patience. Like, you're literally just pushing the buttons to see how far you could go. And in the moment you realize how far you could go, you stop, or you like the reaction, and you're like, ha! Now we know. So that's reality. Why else did you do that to a sub? Bored. It goes back to lack of fluency, lack of instructional fluency, and it's reactive. Usually subs are coming in, they don't come in. Now, how many of you have experienced an effective sub where the class actually ran better than your regular teacher? Right? You've all experienced that. Usually those subs, they come in with expectation. They knew what they were teaching, and right off the bat, when I've experienced subbing several times as a teacher, right off the bat, the first thing I will tell the kids, and this isn't a joke, is I'm a black belt in martial arts, I don't tolerate disrespect, and as long as you're respectful to me, I will be equally respectful to you. So my attitude will be driven by your attitude. Literally, when I sub, I tell them that. A reason I tell them the martial arts, I want them to think I'm cool, and at the same time, there's that, ooh. And then usually it warrants some reaction. Can you show us a move? And I'll be like, sure, I'll show you one move.
Come here, buddy, I'll choke you out.
Yeah, come here, buddy, let me choke you out. You know, whatever. But again, it's not informal. I came in there formal with a fluency, and immediately I know what I was going to teach. And usually when I subbed, if I didn't know what the lesson of the teacher was, I had my own lesson that I was going to teach for the day in relation to that subject. And most of you, if you look back at the sub that ended up teaching better than your teacher, they probably employed the same strategies. They had expectations right off the bat. They kind of got you bought into who they are. You know, they said something that you're like, oh, this dude is cool, or this teacher is cool. You know, and then immediately they knew what they were teaching about. Or they made it look like they knew what they were teaching about. There was no lag time. There was no point where it was boring. So again, it really goes back to those same challenges. Like I said, get out of the mindset that the reason rooms escalate is because of the students. Get in the mindset that the room escalates because of the adult and your preparation for the class. And it will honestly change the dynamic in your room. Alright, so, next part. Why formalize? I think we talked about this, but this is just so we can look. This is why it's important to formalize classroom management, because achievement. If you want here's the deal. When kids feel successful, they're not bored. I say that again. When kids feel successful, they're not bored. Now, again, you cannot account for the 5% kids who just have behaviors who will always be bored even if they're successful. Okay, but in general, kids won't be bored if they're achieving something. Here's the other part. Kids are not going to be bored if they're socially engaged. Kids are not bored when they're working with their friends, even if it's the most boring task. Kids are not bored when their friends are equally engaged. That's social success. And finally, kids are not bored, it goes back to the achievement and success, when they see progress in their skill. If a kid can see that they're getting better, by nature they won't be bored. It only becomes boring when they can't do it and they're not having a semblance of success. It's too hard, or it's too easy that they're not seeing some sort of gradual success, or they're not socially engaged and they'd rather, social butterflies, they'd rather talk to their friend than pay attention to the skill building that's happening. But if classroom management is formalized, these three things happen and it pretty much repeats itself. You don't need to manage the classroom as much because these things are happening. The more kids are success breeds success. There's a saying that, game knows game. So I don't know, it's like a basketball thing. Game recognizes game. There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. It's the same thing in classroom management. All right? So game recognizes game. Kids recognize when the teacher is invested, when the teacher really wants them to learn, and when the teacher is really passionate about it and is planned and structured. They recognize that. And they will play to that expectation. They also recognize the opposite. They recognize when the teacher is not engaged. They recognize when they feel that the teacher is forced. Or even if the teacher is passionate, they recognize when the teacher is not prepared and not confident. One of the worst things you can do is come into a class and look like you're lost. All right, you literally have, because kids are mean. If you all don't know this, I'm going to tell you right now, you want honest opinion, whether you look good or not, ask kids. Kids are they don't have that social skill yet of social awareness. Kids will tell you if Miss, what'd you do today? You look ugly. Oh, I forgot to put my makeup on, thanks. They will do that to you. Kids, why is your hair all messed up? Or, they'll look at me like, what's your problem today, mister? Are you depressed? I'm like, because I have a serious face? Like, yeah, oh, you look angry. I'm like, sorry. So, kids recognizes that. So when you're not prepared, or you look like you're not prepared, or you look like you're scared of them, because they can also tell when, oh, Mr. Keenan is scared of me, they're going to attack you. And I don't mean that in the nicest sense. I mean that think of a tiger getting ready to pounce. And again, you can't castigate them. That's their nature. And we as adults, we just got better at hiding it or realizing when it's kind of socially acceptable or when we can get away with it. But kids haven't realized that yet, so to them, they're going to do it. So that's why this is so important. So, remember, again, I talked about this, well-prepared, good instruction. Well-prepared, good instruction is one of the best behavior management tools. The more prepared you are with your lesson, the more that classroom has pencils, paper, the more you don't have to look for materials. It's well prepared and structured. The more you follow the session flow that you all learned, the less classroom management issues you'll have. That session flow will save your life, and then your preparation the day before will save your life. Right? It used to drive me insane. Those that have worked with me, I used to have this checklist that everybody who ran the back had. And on the top of that checklist, it was literally, are pencils sharpened? That was at the top of the checklist. And those that have worked with me know why that is so important. Because here's the reality, during homework time, all you need is for one kid to wait for their pencil before starting their homework to completely destroy the entire homework classroom. I'm not joking. See, those that have worked the back and homework time, when we used to have strict homework time, they're all nodding their heads. Because it used to be they don't believe me. It's like, it's just pencils. They can wait. It's like 2 seconds to sharpen a pencil. Until they experienced the first time they had that one kid who literally...
I didn't have to experience it, but...
Yeah, but you still experience it because sometimes people...
With Rima, the pencils weren't sharpened all the same, so she had to go and resharpen them.
we won't go there.
I
Yeah,
got
we
my
won't.
own pencil sharpener from home.
Yeah. So again, it really literally that well-prepared, good instruction. All right, that's why session flow. Now, when we think about PBIS, we think about 3 tiers, and you all should have seen this pyramid already as well. You are teaching to the 80% of the class. One of the greatest, you will make mistakes, and you will do it at least once, even though you've been through this training, because it's human nature. One of the greatest mistakes you will make is you will adjust your entire lesson because of the 5%. It's one of the greatest mistakes you will make. Like I said, even though I've done this lesson, you will still do it. At least at one point, you will be tempted to do it. But the reality of it is, you need to adjust your class to the 80%. Find that 80%. Regardless of if you have all BH kids, there's still an 80% to that BH kids that have normal or semi-normal behaviors or manageable behaviors. Design your class to 80%. This only becomes not true. Okay, I do want to say there's moments when this becomes not true. When you are completely dealing with, what do we call those, Art? The high acuity kids, which we don't deal with. For the most part, you won't experience that. That's the only time this doesn't become true. You know, we're talking about, you know, special ed teachers who have, you know, kids that have all kind of like different symptoms where they have kids, you know, those of you that have been on a tour on a full school that's a full autism school. You know, that's when this doesn't become true. But for your setting, this is almost always 99.9% true. You need to design your class based on the 80%. And then what you need to do is you have a 15 to 20% that you have a specialized prevention. You know, this is when if you were a traditional teacher, you brought extra homework packets or bell work. Because you just know there are those kids that will finish earlier than everybody and they need to be kept busy. And then this is also for the 15-20% where you brought adjusted packets. It's a little bit easier work than the rest of the class because you just know this group of kids, they're gonna have a hard time. This is also when you make a little bit of seating adjustments. You already know when you walk in, you're gonna scan the room and you're gonna look for the 2 kids that should not be sitting together. And you immediately already kind of have, hey, let's shuffle around. I want everybody to move, blah, blah, blah. Because again, you're that. And then you have the 5% that no matter how prepared you are, just will escalate. You know, I'm not going to name kids, but you all know those that have worked here enough. There are those kids. There's no amount of planning that will do for them. And for those, that's where the RTE team should be involved. If you are teaching the class and you are an RTE team member, you should remember that at that point your role is at the 80% and you should call a different RTE team. So even for those of you that are RTE, because sometimes it will happen, you're the RTE member and you're teaching the class, that 5% is not for you to deal with. you are dealing with the 80%. So always remember that. Always remember this continuum and this triangle. I'm kind of speeding through them because these are concepts we already touched. So I want to kind of move on, right? And again, we already touched that. All right, we already touched this too. One of the most important things you can do is not to allow kids to play what we call the mom and pop game. Right? If you're not familiar with the mom and pop game, you've either not been a parent or you've been asleep all your life and you have not watched your siblings or yourself utilize this. But usually everyone is familiar with the mom and pop game. It's when you go to, depending on who's stricter, like in a traditional setting, you go to dad, Kenji goes to me, and I tell him, no sweets! You are not eating any of that. And then Kenji, not realizing that me and my wife talk, or sometimes we haven't talked, Kenji will go to mom and be like, Mom, can I have some? And me and my wife, not having conversed yet, wife will be like, sure, mom and pop game, right? You go, or in a more adult setting, you want to go to prom, but dad will say no, so you talk to mom first, and then you tell mom, and then mom tells you, I'll take care of dad, right? That's the mom and pop game.
Or so-and-so told me that I could do this. And then you go, that's when I find most common with kids here. It's like,
Here,
what are you doing?
Exactly.
So told me I could do it. And then I say, so if I go ask so-and-so, they said that you could be doing this exactly what,
Exactly. So that is the mom and pop game. Translated to a non-parent setting, it is exactly what Hans described, where a kid will tell you, Mr. J, and some of them are brave enough to say my name. Some of them really are because they know, if Mr. Jansen says it, and they will tell you, Mr. Jansen said or Miss Barbie said I can do it. You should never allow them to play that game. You should always be like, so let me check with him. Alright, the other version of this mom and pop game is because they know you are the weakest link. I hate to say this. But they know that there are weakest link. And you will notice this. And here's the best judge to know if you are considered the kid's weakest link. I hate to put it this way. Are kids constantly asking you for things that will break the rules if they can do something? If you are the first person they go to, more than likely, you are seen by the kids as the weakest link. That's just the truth. Okay, so if you are the person they constantly go to, Mr. Jansen, can we do this? Even though, why are you even asking, dude? You know it's a no. That just means they think you're the weakest link. Alright? And so, it is important that you know the experience, the language, and the vision. And so, one of the best things you can do in this setting, radios. Check. Make sure that is indeed what's happening. Alright? The other thing is, don't deviate from the rules that we're putting in. Don't deviate from the session flow. Don't deviate from, because again, when they walk into that classroom and they're experiencing what they're experiencing in jiu-jitsu and archery or basketball, then they'll realize, everybody here follows the same thing. Darn it. Don't be that nice, I hate to put it this way, don't be the nice guy. Alright? Because honestly, if you are, you will get abused. And there's no other way of putting it. I almost paint the kids as these terrible human beings. They're not. But they're just kids. They will manipulate you. I'm just letting you know. So that's what this is. Now, again, this is really, really important. You want to link all activities to higher ground systems and methods. Alright? No matter what activity you're doing, you want to make sure that they understand that that activity is higher ground. Why is that so important? Why is it important for kids to know that whatever activity they're in, it's not just Mr. Hunt's idea, but it's higher grounds? Why is that?
Because if the student likes what Mr. Hahn is doing versus what higher ground is doing, they're going to gravitate towards Mr. Hahn because higher ground is that guy. So if he says, no, sorry, because this is how we do it here.
Because you will cause problems for other staff members. That's one of the main reasons why. And you will become that staff member that all the other staff members again, I'm being real. Now, all the other staff members dread, they're scared to get the kid after they've been with you. And if you don't know that those conversations are happening, they happen. They happen here, they happen in schools. You know, it's that teacher in schools where like, oh God, he was with Mr. So-and-so. Yup. Oh no. You don't want to be that staff member. And so you want to make sure that all your activities are linked to our systems and methods. Why else is this so important? Consistency. It goes back to the previous chart. You want a common experience. And so when you're doing something with them that doesn't relate to higher ground's vision and language, then the experience does not become consistent. Why else is this so important? Why do you want to link everything to higher ground systems and methods? Same experience? Same language? Why else?
Also, because like if it can like cut out defeat from other people like that are in your organization. So it's like if I am saying this is what high ground is, and then the kid says, well, so and so who's also a teacher at high ground says I can do this now, and I don't have to. Then it's like, well, then what? Because we're working off the honors and or like a non-traditional behavior expectation, it like can make it so that you don't have any. It like pulls your authority out from under you, sort of.
Absolutely. It kind of goes back to the first one. You want your authority intact. This is also part of the reason, as good practice, we don't correct each other publicly. Because one of the worst things you can do to a fellow staff member or teacher is remove their authority. It's part of the reason I like I said, I'm okay with getting corrected or even getting made fun of, as long as there are no kids and there's no community members. Community members is more like my ego. But with the kids, it's honestly because, again, you want to keep each other's authority intact. And so when kids see, for example, that you guys are making fun of Miss Isa in the middle of an activity, they begin to see that expectation as that. So again, part to what Han's saying, you don't want your own authority swept under you. And when it's a higher ground system and method, then they know that unfortunately this is non-negotiable. It's not something they can go to Miss Barbie and say, Mr. Hans is so mean. He only let us go to the bathroom on certain times and we have to be on a line and we're being watched and he don't trust us to be by ourselves in the bathroom.
Oh, he's getting a raise.
Yeah. and they won't have that because they'll know the reason we do this is exactly how higher ground expect them. Mr. Hans is not saying this is just Mr. Hans saying. Mr. Hans says, as part of our self-management procedure, we go in a line to make sure that everybody's doing this, blah, blah, blah. And there's no added rules that only Mr. Hans make. And the kids don't see that as a way to circumvent the system.
It also keeps you guys away from being the bad guys.
Oh yeah.
Because what Jansen and I have always wanted is let us be the bad guys, because we want you guys to have a relationship with them. So if they ask us, because that's the higher ground way, that's how Mr. Jansen and Miss Barbie have put things in order. It's okay to say that as well, because we want you to be the guy and the girls that make that relationship with them, that they'll come and trust you, because you guys will be working with them more than what we will.
And also, there's like an underlying seeing that we're doing things in a certain way. Not only is the classroom manager doing it, and you get a common voice, but there's an underlying safety and commonality. So if something happens, we can't say, well, I did it this way, well, I did it this way, well, he did it that way, which basically means, as a whole, we're not working together. So if somebody says, well, I go to the bathroom with the kids, well, then that means you're open to questioning, which means we all are. I threw a ball into his head. Well, that means that now everybody is susceptible to accusation because the veil's been lifted, or the walls come down. They're not all open to speculation.
And so this is why I honestly love when we hear feedback from Dave kids who come here and they literally tell us, this is just like Dave. Like, we love that feedback because that tells us that their experience outside of school is the same experience that are being brought here. And that's what we want. Now, that's pretty simple. That's kind of just a chart. Alright, so teaching social skills, right? Social emotional learning is done best when? Social interaction, right? So this is just what it is. Tell, model, explain. Name the behavior. That's why, that's something that some adults are not comfortable with. And it's one of the things that some volunteers coming into Higher Ground, they sometimes have an aversion to, is when they watch us name behaviors. Like, you should tell kids everything positive. No, again, we don't believe in that. We do want to give them positive feedback, okay? I'm not saying we're not military, we're not boot camp. Alright, we're definitely not drill instructors where everything you do is wrong. Alright, but we do want to name behaviors. We want to tell, we want to model behaviors, we want to model it, and we want to explain. If we don't want kids yelling, don't de-escalate by yelling. That's why we count down. Or we do mindfulness, we do breathing. Because we want to model it. Right. Practice. Here's the one thing, especially if you're in a classroom setting, and you want certain norms to be accepted, right? If you want all the kids to raise their hand, force them to practice it. I want everybody to raise your hand, and eventually it becomes habitual for you. There are certain things in jiu-jitsu that I don't even need to remind kids anymore because they practice it so much, it's automatic. For example, taking your shoes off. It's almost hilarious because they will get mad at the adults stepping on the mats. They will yell at the adults. Like, whoa, and we're like, don't worry about it. They have instructions, But again, you want to practice it. You want to monitor and assess. Now, when you're teaching a big classroom like this, you want to make sure that a kid knows that you are watching them. I know that sounds creepy, but it is good for a kid to know that they're not slipping through the cracks, whether good or bad behavior. You want to pull them to the side a little bit later. Hey, I noticed you were doing this to so-and-so. Next time, I'm watching you. Next time, don't do that. Because you'll be surprised how many kids are quietly conniving behind closed doors and they're making a kid cry, right? And then because you didn't say anything, they think they got away with it. So it's important that you monitor and assess. And then positive feedback when they make progress. You want to give a feedback. Too many times we have a culture where we only talk to a kid in correction when they're doing something wrong. It's almost, I made it a habit, now I don't need to write it down, it's just mental notes. I make it a habit that when I'm coaching, if I gave a student some sort of feedback on a negative behavior, I make it a habit that the next day, if they did something towards that behavior, I'm going to literally give them a compliment. And I literally say, hey, I really like how today you were focused in my class. And it shows a huge improvement from yesterday. So you want to do that consistently. And the funny thing about this positive feedback, alright, even though, like I said, we're not an all positive feedback place, it is so meaningful for kids. When you give them a positive feedback, when they know that your positive feedback is meaningful. When they know it's based on progress. Here's something that kids literally tell me, and even like Isa tells me to this day. It's like when I give a compliment, they're like, oh my God. Like even I have an adult now who used to be in my jiu-jitsu class. I gave him a compliment. He's like, wait, can you say that again? Because to them, it's like, that really means I'm making progress. They know it's not the generic, good job. Everybody's doing good. So don't make your feedback generic. That's why it's important you name a behavior and then you give a feedback on the improvement of that behavior. Because then it's meaningful. And then adjust. If you notice something is not working in your session flow, in your lesson plan, adjust it for the next day. Don't be so stubborn that you're like, this is how the curriculum needs. This is step by step. I need to be in arm bars by now. I'm still not in arm bars. Adjust. Alright, so you want to adjust to the kids. Questions so far? Like I said, a lot of these are strategies now that we're kind of gonna go into. Again, the systems, you don't actually need to build it. We're building it for you. So remember that if there is something not working in your class, you are not alone. Bring it up. If you're here, bring it up to Isa. Alright, if there's something just not working in your class, don't try to resolve things on your own. It's okay to come up with a solution, but always inform the leadership team. Because they're constantly doing data review, right? And it's the same thing if you're in DAPE. You're having an issue, don't just try to solve it on your own. Bring it up. Even if you have a solution already, bring it up. Let them know what your solution is, but bring it up. Because again, we all want to be on the same page. Finally, regular individual school action planning. Okay, that should be higher ground action planning. You should be on a regular basis, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, depending on how often you run a class. You should be constantly reflecting on how your classroom management went in general. It has to be a constant habit. It's something that I consistently do. It should get to the point where you have it down to a science. When I used to coach jiu-jitsu in the area where there were other things happening, I was the only coach that had my kids facing a certain way. The lineup was a certain way, everything, because literally I consistently assessed when my kids behaved the most. To the point that my session flow became different because I realized, oh, at exactly 5:15 to 5:30, there's no one here because they're all outside doing warm-ups. That's when I'm gonna actually teach. And I'm gonna do the drills and the warm-ups after. Right? Because again, I'm constantly assessing when my class is most effective. They always sat to the wall where the medals are at. Never any other direction. You know, and I told coaches, and some coaches believed me, some didn't. Those that believed me, they were more effective. I told them there's a reason why they're facing that direction. That is the most effective direction they're facing when they don't get distracted. So again, you should constantly be looking at that because it will also improve your techniques. And literally, sit down once a week and look like, okay, this week my classroom escalated this much times. I wonder why. What can I adjust? And then adjust it. And then next week, look at it again. All right, my classroom did not have. And sometimes you will do experiments where it gets worse. You're like, holy crap. You know, this was way worse. Definitely never doing that again. Right? So you gotta constantly do that. Alright, that's the same thing. We're not gonna really do that. Alright, here are the 3 basic elements. Alright? 3 basic elements. This is pretty self-explanatory. The most important element is, again, your curriculum. Alright, I've said this over and over. Well-structured curriculum, well-structured lesson, well-prepared lesson with good session flow is the #1 management element. The second one, environmental management. Okay? How your classroom is arranged is very, very key to classroom management. I can't give you specifics because again, that would be specific techniques, but I am giving you a strategy. Try different seating arrangements until you find the one that is best for the kid. And when you find it, always let your manager know so that they know that that is the most effective. If it's not a seating issue, whatever it is, try the best way to effectively manage the environment. Lights, chairs, everything in the environment matters. If there's something broken, trust me, the kid is like a magnet to kids. Something is broken, you can almost be guaranteed that is the first chair somebody will sit in, and it's usually your most distracted kid that will sit on that chair. It's like a magnet. It's like, I don't know what it is. So make sure environmental management is there. And then finally, the last part is proactive behavior management. Proactive. Not reactive, proactive. you set guidelines and expectations. At the beginning of each class, you should be telling the kids every day, even though you may sound like a robot, you should be reminding kids of what their values are. Most effective way that I've seen this in a school setting is at Hollinger. At least last year. Yeah, huh? If they still do it. Hopefully they still do it. But for the 2 years that we were there, every assembly, almost every class, they would start, what are our 3 B's? They literally did it just like Higher Ground. You know, the kids would repeat it. Be responsible, be something,
Respectful.
be respectful, and there's another third. Is it beyond? No.
It's 3 hours.
Yeah, 3 R. Responsible, responsible. The 3 B's with the 3 R's. Whatever it is. Right? Yeah. My point is, no. My point is they do it every time. And then what they do is every assembly they ask kids to define it. What does that mean? If you guys watch Higher Ground in the after school program, Isa does that every dismissal. Again, it sounds like even at DAPE you can do this. Before you start class, hey guys, what's our expectation? We expect each other to be respectful. Tell me what that means. We expect each other to be honorable. Start that every session. And again, because that makes it proactive. The other proactive thing you can do, you know you have that 15% of kids that will get your attention no matter what. So as they walk in the room, give them the attention. Again, small strategy. If you have a kid that you know will get your attention regardless, when they walk in the room, give them the attention they already need. And you know, however it is. That way they're not getting it through negative means. You know, you have a class clown. Something that I've done in my class. Again, I used to teach 4th and 5th grade, and I used to teach math and science, right? Something I've done with the class, I had this one student who's a class clown. So every week, he had the platform to give a joke. The beginning of class, once a week. Hey, not gonna name the kid because he's an adult now and he may end up working here one day. Because I mean, Sabrina ended up working here. You know, I'm like, hey, go ahead, give a joke. Some of you actually know him, so better not say anything. Right? And so once a week, he would tell the class a joke. So again, proactive behavior management. That way, I'm not dealing with this kid giving jokes while I'm teaching. You know, sharing jokes to friends while I'm teaching. This kid knows that every Friday, he has to come up with the best joke he has, and he's allowed up to 3 jokes. And that became his kind of like, as long as he wasn't disruptive all week, that became that. So, now here's the tips and actual strategies, okay? We're gonna go. Yeah, let's go on a break. Go on a break, sorry. Alright, go on a break. Quick break. We have maybe about 30 room almost every 5 minutes. I know that's like, but that's not that possible. It actually is pretty easy to do. You know, interaction with your kid every 5 minutes in a contact setting can be something as simple as, you know, check their work while doing the work. You go over their shoulder, you acknowledge them. Even as simple as acknowledging them. Alright, that is considered a positive interaction. The other thing is, whenever you do correction, and I kind of spoke about this already, for some sort of violation, alright, always remember to always revert it back to the rule or the value that they're doing and positively reinforce that. Does that make sense? So it goes back to what I said, the progress and monitor, where I corrected Isa for being a potty mouth, right, in the classroom, right? See, she does that. And I talked to her, hey Isa, you know, I really need you to not use that language. And then the next day she comes into my room right? And again, I'm gonna positively interact with her already. So prior to her even coming into my room, this is not a negative interaction. Me talking to Isa. Hey Isa, remember what we talked about yesterday about your language? What was it?
Don't
All right, you got that right? You think you can do that today? Positive interaction right there. And
Even a neutral interaction in like.
even a neutral interaction is a positive interaction. It's either positive or negative. All right? If you're not correcting them and reacting to a behavior, that's considered a positive interaction. All right? Because for the most part, again, we're using the fact that most adults don't even have a neutral interaction with kids. The first thing they do when kids walk in is blurt out commands. Do this. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? You know, it's almost a parody when you look at like American shows and classrooms, right? As kids are walking in, teachers are doing what?
Johnny, take your hat off.
Yeah, Johnny, take your hat off. Don't run, right? So that's why it's important to have that. Second tip, actively supervise. Most teachers don't realize the importance of scanning. I don't know if you guys notice, I scan the room. It's like a habit of mine already. Like I literally scan. Just the fact that you're making eye contact with every kid is a very proactive behavior management tool. Why is that?
They know you're watching.
It's that subconscious, ooh, Mr. Jansen knows what I'm doing. It really is that. It's just that subconscious. Now, every once in a while, you'll have the kids like Barbie or Isa who don't care, even if you scan them.
You can watch me not.
You can watch me not listen, right? Again, you take into account the 15%, right? But just the scanning, for the most part, kids, there's that subconscious thing of I'm being watched.
I think that also like scales a little bit with the age of the kid as far as like I've also found that with certain high schoolers or middle school, like more responsible middle schoolers, if like they constantly feel like I'm like watching them, it's not so much like a general supervision, but then they might feel like, you know, every time you come in here, you sit here and look at me. And so I think sometimes like it's like especially with younger kids, it like helps a lot because they don't have as much of that tendency to be like, oh, you're just like picking on me every time. But I think it also like it has to scale with the appropriateness with the age group.
And this is why I said continuously. Because that's a very good point. If you're only looking at the people you know are going to exhibit behaviors, that's what's going to happen. But that's why, in general practice, you want to scan everybody at all times. You want to make eye contact with almost every single student at all times. That's why that word there, continuously, right? That because it addresses that. Because you're correct, even with adults, if I'm constantly just looking at one person, that person's like, oh, why are you watching me? What the heck's your problem? Right? So, again, interact frequently and positively. Again, those are kind of repeats of the previous one. Positively interact with most students during lessons. So, here's part of where using silence is so critical, right? Because a lot of times what ends up happening is you only get the kids that are already willing to talk, and they're the only ones engaged. This is also why small groups are really important. If you guys notice, most of our reflections happen where? In what setting? What do? I break you out into pairs or small groups. And I don't know if you guys notice, but when we do group reflection, how many people participate?
Oh, wait, no, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Maybe 3 or 4, right? When we do the group reflection, like when it's everybody, there's maybe 3 or 4 people. But when we do the reflection in small groups, what happens? Everyone. And I almost have to, not almost, every single time I've had to like cut it short. Like, you know what? It's overtime. Y'all can go home. You know, because again, so that's the whole concept behind interacting with most students, right? So breaking them down in small groups will help you do that. And then the type of contact, that's part of the whole love language. Some students, right, you need to high five them. You need to touch them, right? Appropriately, obviously. Some students, they just need visual contact. They just need to know you know they exist. And some students, you need to make it heard. Hey, good job, Hans. Yeah, you need to go to them one-on-one when they're working, right? And this is where it goes back to why I say grouping, small groups really matter, and you need to integrate that into your lesson. Mix instruction with social interactions. Because again, if kids are achieving, or kids are doing things with their friends, or kids are building skill, you don't almost need to manage a classroom. So if you're mixing social interaction, that's why I said, part of your session flow, if you notice, there's a small group practice. Always. Those of you that were in the session flow training, right? Because again, when you do that, it manages a lot of behaviors. And here's the other part where I call the naming the behavior positive and quickly, right? If it's a low intensity problem, it's not a big deal, call it out. Do it quickly. Now you don't need to do it publicly right away. So like if I notice, hey, I need you to really stop what you're doing and pay attention to class. Right? You can do that. Might be a little bit quiet, but what? Right? Signal current, state the correct response. Ask the student. It's the example I gave to you about Isa yes, like for cussing. Ask them to restate. Hey, remember what we talked about? Remember what we talked about? Yeah? Okay, tell me what we talked about. What was your interpretation of that? Alright, so and he was like, don't cuss. Alright, cool. You think you can do that today? Yep, absolutely. Cool. Right? So you want to do that. And the reason you want to do it quick, here's what we tend to do as adults. When we're correcting, even managers do this, directors do this, we like to prolong it. We like to give this long-winded 1 hour meeting with a kid for their behavior. Honestly, they maybe paid attention with you the first 30 seconds. That is just reality. You could be giving them the story of your life, and they maybe just paid attention at most 5 minutes. Yeah, so sometimes a look is so important. Sometimes just looking at them like, yeah, it's a reminder, and they're like, oh yeah. And it's not like a look that, it's more of like, oh yeah. You know, I still do that even with my own kids. Kenji knows I have a look. And when I give him that look, that means stop arguing, stop doing whatever the heck he's doing, and sit quiet. Right? And that again, that's very quick, it's very short, and kids pick up on those cues. They do. Kids, as much as I've described kids as little terrors, right? They do know how to act. For the most part, you're dealing with kids that actually do know how to act. They just don't have anybody really teaching them how to and enforcing it. But they know what's acceptable, right? Now, next part. Follow higher ground procedures for chronic problem behaviors. If you know that that kid needs an RTE team called, do it.
4 Gs, right there.
Yeah, do not try to solve the problem on your own. Follow the procedures. You know that if a kid is escalated and you're working with them, you need an RTE team. You did your part. You named the behavior. Nothing changed. Don't try to go there and fix the problem. Follow the actual procedure. Whatever the procedure is in date. Right? It's the same thing. Because and again, consistency and business-like. You have to let that kid know it's not personal. Look, you misbehaved, you acted like a fool, this is what's going to happen. Period. Nothing against you. You can still be my favorite student in the world, but you acted like a fool, sorry. I'm going to have to send you out of the class and have an RTE team member deal with you. And then when they come back in, it's business as usual. You don't need to like, so, what did Miss So-and-so tell you? You don't need to do any of that. So again, follow the procedures and major behavior incidents, which we made it pretty simple for you all. Call an RTE member. Literally. The 5% the RTE will take care of. Don't ask me what they do, but they do something. And hopefully it's ethical. But whatever it is, when they bring them back to your classroom, your job is to continue teaching and to continue to understand that all the behaviors have been taken care of if they were brought back to your classroom. to date, follow whatever the school procedure you were told. If they have and again, you can defer to Araceli and Ria on that. They're misbehaving, there is a procedure. Follow that.
I think the other thing, as someone who does have been an RTE, I think like having a plan on how when that kid comes back, like right away, have something for them to do, or like
Yeah.
right away, like know where they're gonna get back. Because that's the hardest thing is when I de-escalate a kid, and then like I put them back in classroom, and it's like he wanders in, it's like.
Yeah. Well, and that's why on the PBIS triangle, if you guys remember, you gotta account for the 15%. At that point, that kid moved from the 5% to the 15%. They're not the 80% yet. So when that kid comes back to you, you should already have, like Hans is saying, that plan for the 15%. All right, hey, Johnny, good to have you back. Go ahead and do this.
Otherwise, it's kind of just
Exactly. All right, and then report. You cannot over-report at higher ground, whether it's date or program setting. Honestly, at the end of the day, whatever you tell Isa, she's gonna appreciate it, or she's just gonna be like, that's just an everyday thing. Thanks for telling me. You know, but you literally cannot over-report at higher ground. Something happened, let your supervisor know. For the most part, it's gonna be Isa. Freeman.
What do you mean by pre-correct for next occurrence?
It's the same thing that I did with
It's
Isa.
just like, okay.
So the next day, if I already know there's that chronic problem, I already know, again, that's part of my 15%. I already know Isa is on the 15% behavior. So the next time she walks into my classroom, I'm going to pre-correct. Like I said, there are kids that will get your attention anyway. You might as well give it to them before they get it from you. Because usually, it's so much better when you just give it to them. That's just general. Alright, now, smooth, efficient transitions. It's like what Hans is saying. The worst thing you can do when you're running a class, and then this kid comes back to you from the RTE, is have no clue what that kid needs to be doing next. Alright, you gotta have quick, efficient, and smooth. Teach routine, limit to time, alright, engage students immediately. That's why that session flow is your life. Because it literally teaches you to transition from one thing to the next. Right? Transition is the worst thing for adults and kids. Transition breaks routine. So you want to make that as smooth as possible. And here's the other thing. Again, you don't want to be that teacher that the next person teaching the class is afraid of. So that's why you want to reflect. You want to calm kids down. Especially like activities like mine, jiu-jitsu, it's high energy. I gotta bring their energy down to prepare them for the next class. Because what I don't want is to pass these kids up. Unless it's the end of the day, I'm dismissing them to their parents and I want to be mean. Right? But at the end of the day, I want to pass them to the next rec, to the next activity, even in DAPE, because I know DAPE, I've structured it pretty much the same way. There's a community builder, there's an activity 1 and activity 2. It's literally like the after school program. It's the same thing. You don't want to be the person at activity 1 that forgot to reflect and everybody's pumped up from the community builder and then they're going into basketball or judo and they're like, oh, and they're still, and then that teacher is like, oh my God. And then on the same end, you don't want to be the last activity as you're passing them to lunch, they're all riled up. Right? That's why that reflection is part of the session flow. Because what that does is, again, it brings the energy level from here back to here. Alright? So you want to do those things. Time limits. Very important. You know, if you tell a kid, you know, go do this, give them time. I count down. You have exactly 10 seconds. And the whole class is counting down with me until you got your stuff. Now, that may sound mean, but it's very important because kids have a very weird definition of time. You know, if I told Kenji, go drink your shake. This is a regular, normal morning routine with him. Go drink water and drink your shake. If I don't give him the time, literally, he's going to sit there, stare at his cup, and then he's going to drink it 5 minutes before we have to leave. I'm like, really, Kenji? No. But if I tell him, you have exactly a minute to drink that and a minute to eat this, they'll get it done. Time limits. It's okay to give kids time limits. Alright. Next part. I think I've overstressed this. Be prepared. Alright, that is on you. If you don't have the materials ready and your class blows to bits, that is on you. Alright, before you run a basketball class, you should make sure balls are pumped. Let me just tell you something. One of the things that hurt me the most is when I hear on the radio, in the middle, where's the pump? Or where's this? I'm like, seriously? Like, you guys didn't get that prepared before the class started? Right? Because again, classroom management behavior tool. That's literally the easiest. Be prepared for the activity. Right? If you're scrambling for things, 2 seconds as the activity already started, you already lost the class. Alright? Clear explanations, outcome, objectives. I think again, session flow takes care of that. One of the first things you do in the session flow is what? Before the mindfulness. What do you do in your session flow? Hopefully you all remember how the session flow goes. What? You greet the students, and then right after greeting the students, what do? You give your objectives, what they're learning that day. Again, session flow accounts for almost everything in here. You greet the students, that gives you your positive interaction right away. The moment they sit down, or the whatever your thing is, all right, class, today we are learning X, Y, Z, and then mindfulness. Like those 3 things account for almost the first 10 parts of the strategy, right? Efficient time. Again, session flow accounts for this. It's giving you literally just enough time for kids not to be bored, right? So that session flow, again, I'm going to tell you right now, that session flow should be something you almost memorize. If you're running a class, you need to, and we practiced it, by memory note. First one, greet the kids. Second one, objectives. Third one, mindfulness, right? Fourth one, whatever warm-up or drill or guided practice. Fifth one, instruction. Sixth one, small group practice. Seventh one, feedback. Eighth one, fun, flow practice. Ninth one, reflection. Like you should be able to spout it the way I'm spouting it. If you're running a class, because it is literally how you will, because if somebody tells you, I need you to run dodgeball right now, you know, and I need you to sub in, guess what? To make that dodgeball not full of fights and problems, guess what you're going to have to do? Go through the exact same session flow. Alright, welcome kids. My name is Mr. Hans. I don't know why I keep saying Hans today. I'll pick Keenan right now. My name is Mr. Keenan. We're going to be doing dodgeball today. Hey, you, welcome. Glad you're in my class. Alright, what are we doing today? Dodgeball. We're just going to have fun. I'm going to let you guys do X, Y, and Z. And then at the end of this dodgeball session, we're going to see if we learned something. Everybody ready to have fun? Sure. All right, before we do it, let's do a little bit of mindfulness exercise. Maybe breathing is not the best part for mindfulness in dodgeball. You know, whatever. Probably you want them to walk in a line, divide themselves, whatever. There are other mindfulness activities. Right after that, you give the instruction. All right, this is what we're doing. Let's simulate. Let's practice. Guided practice. All right, now let's do the activity. Still literally the same session flow for dodgeball. All right, I want you to break in groups. Pick your leader, pick your medic, pick your strategy. Let's play. All right, round 2. Round 2. I want you to go to your groups. Reflect why you lost. Reflect why you won. See if you can do a different strategy. All right, round 2. All right, same group 1. Hey, group 1. You guys are really nailing this. Group 2. Reflect. Let's see what's going to happen. Find a different strategy. Or maybe time to break up the groups. Let's break up groups. Do dodgeball. You only got 10 minutes left. You don't need the fun because they already did the fun. Reflection. All right, let's everybody do reflection. Maybe you don't want group reflection. Maybe you want to say, all right, I want you all to go with your groups, talk about what happened, talk about the activity, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe you want group, thumbs up, thumbs down for the activity. Up, down, somebody tell me something cool that happened during the dodgeball game, something unique that you learned. Refer back to the, everybody have fun, not everybody, sorry you didn't have fun. Done. Game of dodgeball. Same session flow. So efficient time to instruction. If you consider every activity you're doing as instructional, you won't get lost. Usually what happens with us is we think of compartments and we think, oh, this is just a game. Oh, this is just this. No. Again, the best time to learn social emotional learning is when? Social interactions. So therefore, every interaction is instruction. It can be instructional. I just gave you how I would turn dodgeball into instructional using session flow. So it's the same thing. All right? Active responding. All right? This is pretty simple. All right? You want to make sure that you have established behavioral indicators. Like if you want them to talk, raise your hand. All right? Giving them different tools. If you have a question and you're afraid to ask, you can write it down. Giving them different ways to respond. That's why reflection is so important again, because it teaches them active response. Forces kids to really think and respond. That's why even in my reflection, I have a group reflection that everybody has to participate. The 5 and a fist, thumbs up, thumbs down. And then those that are more vocal can share. Like you want to do that. All right. Next part. Multiple ways to actively respond. I just talked about it. All right. Sorry, we're going to kind of really breeze through some of this because, like I said, some of them are redundant. All right. Regularly check for student understanding. Never assume understanding. I'll say that again. Never assume understanding. Even the kids that never look lost, you have kids that are really good at pretending they get it. Just like you have adults that are constantly nodding their head and it looks like they really understand what you're saying, but they really have no clue. I mean, come on, let's be real. How many times have we done that as adults? Right? That's why sometimes if you guys notice, I'll be like, all right, repeat the concept back to me. Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, nobody's telling me anything. That means you're all just pretending. Right? So, actively check for student understanding. Whether it's a one-on-one setting or a group setting. Alright? Other part. Alright? I think I talked about this already. Feedback and reflection. Alright? Hi, Kenji. You're just gonna stare me down? Is that how it works now? Huh?
Even in fifth grade now.
It's all off and on.
Alright. This is why objectives matter. Right? That's why you want to give objectives at the very beginning, because you want kids to know what's going to happen next.
Can't use it.
No, you're it, so anyone who comes in you to the room, you have to hit them. That's what everyone's been doing. The adults have been doing it, so you have permission to do it.
Just make sure you aim for the shoulders and above.
Yeah, just like I do. Alright, so again, why is this, and let me ask you guys this, why is this so important in managing behaviors? Why is it that telling kids what happens next is part of positive behavior management? They know what to expect, but why does that matter? Why? It's security. It really boils down to feeling safe. Kids feel safe when they know what's going to happen next. Right? So, one of the things that you guys will notice when you ask kids, when do they feel least safe? It is often in a moment where they don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, even in bigger or smaller settings, it's usually that, you know, mom and dad are getting into fights. Why do you feel unsafe? Because I don't know what's going to happen. You missed it. Because I don't know what's going to happen next. Right? Ask a kid what stresses them out the most, and you will find out that a lot of their stress comes from, I don't know what's going to happen next. So in a classroom, you want to give them specific information what's happening next. Even if you're just transitioning. That's why even at Higher Ground, we do that whole before homework time, before rec. We gather everyone, we do a mini assembly and let them know what we're doing, even though it hasn't changed every day. But again, it gives them that security. And here's what you'll notice about kids in the after-school program. You just need to do one day where you don't do everything the way you normally do and watch what kids do. How many of you have experienced that, where we forgot to do something? What do kids do? They freak out.
Let us know what we did and how it's done.
They start arguing with you.
Are we gonna go to the
Are we gonna go? Yeah, they're gonna ask you a billion questions. Or they'll tell you straight up, you forgot to do this.
In the summer program, if I said the wrong activity next, half of them were like, no, 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 we're
They
going
couldn't
to
tell
this.
you it was family consumer science, but they could tell you it wasn't.
Exactly.
Whatever you said it
It
was gonna
wasn't
be.
break time, like, oh, I'm so sorry. Pardon
But
me.
this is so important in behavior management. This is so important. Even in one class, I tell kids when we're going to drill, all right, we're gonna do drills next. I tell kids when we're, okay, everybody sit down, we're gonna do breathing. And what do we do? And you know, this is something Kenji's used to hearing from me. Why do we do this in jiu-jitsu? What are we trying to do during breathing? Are you now gonna be shy about it? All right, fine. All right.
You've proven that you don't do that.
No, that smile, if you know him well enough, that's the smile.
Embarrass me.
Yeah, Dad, why'd you embarrass me in front of everyone?
Know that.
I already know that, but I still wanted to push it. But you know, kids will tell me so that we think about ourselves and jujitsu, right? But again, it's clearly identifying what we're doing next. We're gonna spar next, we're gonna do this next. Next part. Know how many students met the objectives. That's why we do reflection. Find out how many kids actually learned what you're doing. Why is that an important behavior management tool?
Because when they are successful, they pay attention. Right? Is that what you said?
When they're achieving success, they're not bored.
Behavior.
It will breed good behavior. Okay? So this allows you to figure out what you're gonna do tomorrow. It allows you to prepare. If you notice that more than half of your class didn't get your lesson today, then that tells you, okay, I have a problem. I gotta adjust and change something. That way tomorrow they're not gonna, because kids can sustain up to about 2 or 3 days of not understanding something. On the 4th day, they will rebel. Okay? So you can give them something hard that they can't understand up to maybe 2 or 3 sessions, 2 or 3 days. On the 4th day, you better be sure. You can almost expect those kids will take arms and they will have a revolution in your castle. Right? So you want to measure how many kids are meeting objectives. And here's the thing. It only takes a minority amount of kids to not understand something before that spreads and everybody not understanding. So if you have 2 or 3 kids that don't get it, then they vocally express it, and you don't do anything about it on the 2nd day, you'll probably have now 6 kids that don't get it. By the 3rd day, you'll probably have 12 or half of your class already who don't get it. By the 4th day, you'll only have 1 or 2 geniuses who get it, and the rest of 18, for some reason, lost all their mental capacity. That's just how it works. Audie, are you making a comment about that?
We went into some research.
I figured. Alright. This is important. Whether you're teaching dance, archery, music, crossroads, alright? You want to give extra time and attention to kids that during your reflection tells you they don't get it. Because kids want to know you heard them. I used to do this in jiu-jitsu all the time. After class, I would tell kids, all right, if you didn't get it, come see me after class. And I would do a special drill just for that kid. Okay, you don't get this? Fine, let me show you a little bit more drills. It is part of your job. There's an extra, if your class is for 1 hour, all right, remember that you probably should stay an extra 5-10 minutes for those kids. All right, now, sometimes the structure of the place doesn't run that way, so maybe you should address it the next day. But regardless, you want to give them extra time and assistance. All right, because again, when kids are not achieving, that's when behaviors happen. When kids don't see progress, that's when behaviors happen. So the more you don't address the unsuccessful kids, the more behaviors will grow. So you want to address it. Next part, plan activity for next time activity. Okay, what does this mean? How is this different from the other, just letting them know? Who can tell me what the difference is between being prepared for an activity versus planning an activity for the next time activity? What is this exactly talking about?
Maybe if you're teaching a new game, that the next time do a little more instruction.
It's scaffolding of skill. It's exactly that. You want your last activity to be something that they can relate to your next activity. You want to make those mental connections, right? Now, why is this important in behavior management? Why is scaffolding of skill and relating previous lessons to the next lesson so important in behavior management? Why did I put this on the slide?
To remember and you can build off what they already know. It's like the mentoring coaching thing. You can't just assume they know it.
Building off of something. What else? They feel like they get it. It goes back to my 3 things. You will have very little behavior if kids feel successful, if they're engaged in their social circle, or if kids feel that there's skill progression. Have you ever tried teaching a kid something completely cold turkey? Like something completely cold turkey. With no context. If you haven't, try it. And I'll pray for you. No, seriously. Try teaching a kid something with no context and watch the behaviors that they exhibit. Most kids. Now, there are some kids, you can take them to something completely new and they'll be fun. But for example, take a bunch of basketball players to ballet. Right? That's a serious experiment. Take a bunch of kids who have 100% no behaviors, 100% engaged. Then all of a sudden, instead of teaching them basketball that day, literally come in the next day and teach them ballet. Watch what happens. All the behaviors surfing. Okay, you may say, well, but that's ballet. Okay, just change the sport. Teach them soccer all of a sudden. Like without creating context. Watch what the behaviors do. If you've tried it before, tell me what happens. How many of you have tried that before? Tried to teach a kid something completely new without context.
They get confused, they get frustrated.
They get confused. Their automatic response is frustration. I can't do this. That's normal. Right? That's a normal response. Even kids with growth mindset, they will go through a little bit of fixed mindset at that moment. And so that's why scaffolding of skill is so important. You want to be able, your next activity, to seamlessly flow. You want it to like just flow right into it. Alright, and that's pretty much it. If you guys want references of where I got all of this, that's literally it. We can share you guys that slide. And it will give you like hundreds of pages of documents each. I did the easy part for you and just turned it into 18 slides. Right? But that's literally the source materials for all of this. It's PBI, like I said, this is based on PBIS. It's an evidence-based classroom management way. This is literally the same language Sunnyside and TUSD uses. And you guys probably have more training in this than those actual schools. No, a lot of them don't use it.
They say they use it and they have teams for it, but this is not what they use.
They don't use it.
Yeah, I know. I was like, this is not. That's why I came to know this is not what they do.
Well, that's why I'm doing PBIS training in schools. That's why I've been asked to do it in schools.
They honestly don't need MTSS if they have PBIS.
They don't, absolutely.
Which is why I'm so confused why they switched from PBIS to MTSS.
Will not ask us.
Some handshakes.
So, again, I go back to this. If you paid attention to the session flow class, this is nothing more than a supplement to it. Because the session flow class, that lesson that we did on how to integrate social emotional learning into any activity, That is your best management tool. All these other things are just tips and strategies you need to remember. But if you're following the session flow accounts for majority of these things only. So just remember that. And like I said, classroom management, the only reason it's problematic is because we have the intrinsic belief that it's the kids and they're the problems, which is not true. And for the most part, we don't once again realize that classroom management needs to be formally taught. You need to teach it. We are going to share you guys this slide. Yeah, we'll share you guys because this is something you guys can review. And it's good to review. You guys can go through it. And